As the bumper tells you, this is the Ochelli Effect. I'm your host, Chuck Ochelli, on UCY.TV radio. It is May 19th, 2015, and I think it's Tuesday. Seems to be Tuesday. Anyway, what are we going to do tonight? You know, in light of the wonderful news feeds out there, who knows what we should do tonight, but it is Tuesday night, so I'm going to do what I like to do. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in via your applicable applications of choice, via your fondle slab of selection. You know, it is a wonderful thing when you can use those applicable applications to tune in via the TuneIn app or whatever the hell else, Shoutcast. You know, if you're using your media, Windows Media Stream, whatever it is, or if you decided to just simply go to the website at ucy.tv/TOE, do appreciate you either way, no matter how you're taking a listen to this presentation. I'm being kind and generous about the critiques and things that are offered, because I could call it a lot of things that I do, but generally speaking, it's just a conversational show which is meant to illuminate certain aspects of other people's research of the really truly resonant ideas in the alleged freedom, alleged movement. Yes, I use it twice there, and all of that kind of good stuff. And despite the egotistical and maniacal rantings of some, I do like to present what I think is among the most sane of them out there. So in the first hour, we're going to have Roger Landry, who is the founder of the Liberty Beacon, and also the main ranter, and I know we're going to discuss something that is near and dear to my heart tonight. And in the second hour, we'll have Frank Gregory Ford back on, who has a lot of things to say, and I'm not really sure where that one's going to go. Of course, Frank Gregory Ford is the guy that we have had on before and discussed the actual finding of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You know, there was some realistic angles to that. However, of course, we were being lied to, as per usual, via the mainstream media stream, and of course, your friendly neighborhood politicians for hire, you know, pimping out the prostitutes that are out there to aspire to the lies. And that is one of the things that goes on. But meanwhile, like I said, first hour, Roger Landry, who is the founder, main ranter, and also just a all-around interesting guy, and a guy that I do actually call my friend. You know, despite the fact that that may not always be the most pleasant thing to be labeled with nowadays. Roger Landry from The Liberty Beacon, and that is The Liberty Beacon, all one word, .com. Good evening, Roger. How are you?
Well, I've got to tell you something. I don't care how uncomfortable it makes someone else. I really don't give a damn. But for you to say that you are my friend will always instill a little bit of pride in me that I can still go out and make friends with the people that really count in this world. And you're on that list, Chuck, and you should be.
Roger, I never know what to say to somebody who compliments me, but I do appreciate it. And of course, sir, it is an honor and a privilege that I have you on so often. That you and I have so many conversations, not just on the air, but to be honest with you, just to be able to be your friend is one of those things that I do appreciate. And I know it just sounds like all I'm doing is kissing up to a guest, but this isn't just an average guest. This is a gentleman that I work with, and whose general cause is absolutely near and dear to my own personal heart, my own personal agenda, regarding what it is that I try and do and why it is I expend the countless, amount of energy that I do trying to get certain words out there. Of course, the Liberty Beacon is one of those great examples, and is a wholly unique project in that I have only seen people attempting to unify their voice. And we've talked about this several times, that creating a chorus, of, that note which, cries for freedom and for liberty for not just the American people, but for all people. That's something that's entirely unique, and you don't get that everywhere, Roger. You just don't. There's a lot of people that want to divide and subdivide and pit themselves against others, and pit other people against other people that they have, sort of pigeonholed into different categories. And it's all about this controlled, paradigm of opposition. And that's what it's about. I mean, way beyond the whole red and blue, and way beyond which part of the country you're from, and which language do you speak, and how well do you speak your language, and everything else. The whole class system. It's just everything seems to seek and divide us, and that's one thing that the Liberty Beacon does not do. And this is one of those things that you've been consistent about, because generally speaking, one of these larger organizations that has cooperative individuals, eventually ego or those other old school sort of divisive agendas usually do creep in and create a lot of damage to the overall message. And that has not happened with the Liberty Beacon.
Well,
And I'm glad that I'm actually part of it. So thank
when
you.
when you consider that the more power that any individual gets, it's a drug. Power is a drug. Okay, the Liberty Beacon is not based on a pyramid type structure whereby uh, even myself, I founded this project, but I refuse to have a title. I do not step on the toes of my directors. We talk about things, I give them advice, but somebody wouldn't be a director within the project if they didn't have more knowledge than I do on in a specific area. I don't want people that know less than I am, less than I do, so that I can control them. To me, that is the slow destruction, as you said, of any good organization. I tried very, very hard when I went out and looked for the directors of different departments within this organization to find people that knew more about that particular topic or performing that particular or reaching that particular goal than I did, simply because, eh, again, I made a meme up not too long ago that says a true leader is determined so not by those he chooses to stand behind him, but those he chooses to stand beside him. And for anybody who thinks that I rule the Liberty Beacon Project because I founded it, Chuck will tell you very, very quickly that that's not true. The people who run the radio portion of this network run the radio portion of this network. The people who run who are the directors of personnel are the directors of personnel, and I could go on down the list. Now, I'm the talking head. I'm the public relations guy because this is what I do well. I get a word out. But what we base this on and what we found we needed to do, and Chuck, you hit on this, you hit all around the periphery of this. There are phenomenal groups out there lots of them, that rail against political tyranny. There are phenomenal groups out there, lots of them, that rail on economic tyranny, banks, banksters, huge corporations, so on and so forth. There are groups out there, lots of them, that rail against the evil mechanism of vaccines. And again, I could say the same thing again about GMOs. I could say the same thing again about geoengineering. I could say the same thing again about fluoride. But yet, you will find that if you go to talk to somebody and you're one of these people who rails against political tyranny, which we all need to be doing at this point, I honestly believe that, but you're talking to somebody whose main focus is on fluoride, they both have a mindset that you are not talking or understanding what I'm talking or understanding, so why are we talking? This is what the Liberty Beacon Project does. We push back against anything that perpetrates tyranny against humanity. I don't care if it's drugs. I don't care if it's vaccines. I don't care if it's political tyranny, perpetual warfare. Because the one thing they all have in common, and you and I have discussed this, Chuck, is you can trace them all back to the same people. These are all mechanisms being perpetrated as tyrannies against we the people, and not just in the United States, but across this ever-loving planet. It is a humanity issue. It's not an American issue. So when this gentleman with vaccines says to this gentleman who's talking about political tyranny, you're not talking about what I'm talking about, this is where we provide the bridge. Because the same people that are putting you into political tyranny are putting you into health tyranny, are putting you into perpetual warfare tyranny, are putting you into the mission is the same, the goal is the same. What they hope to achieve is the same, which is to cull the herd, to make us weak, to strengthen their control over us. I don't care what type of tyranny you're talking about. The Liberty Beacon Project will promote anybody who wishes to push back against it. This is, I love to say this, Mary, Mary, run for the roundhouse. They can't corner you there. This is the roundhouse of tyranny.
Right. That's exactly the point, is that every single one of these things, every single one of these separate issues that all of us, do seem to lean in one direction or another on. A lot of us are, especially concerned with particular areas of interest. But the fact is, at the end of the day, all of it, whether it be the intelligence, big pharma, whether it be the, the media brainwashing, the school systems, thusly the government extensions into your child's education, therefore into your mindset, whether it be the GMO products, the all sorts of chemical disillusion of the human being, every single one of these things boils down to the domination and disintegration of the human population. That's what it comes down to. And this is what we're all interested in stopping, because we all see that all of these things are quite interconnected. One way or another, at the end of the day, you wind up having to understand that it is the great panopticon, that it is the interlocking
Chuck,
facets of this that do this. Yes, sir.
Chuck. So you just put that so eloquently. Me, I rant. You speak with eloquence. But let me take this one step further. You've got, say, 10 million people railing against political tyranny. You've got 5 million people railing against economic tyranny. You've got 8 to 10 million people railing against GMOs. You've got another 10 million people railing against vaccines. You've got another 10 million or 5 million people railing against fluoride. Okay, so what we have is everybody looking for the same thing, looking to protect humanity from the tyranny being perpetrated against us in whatever name you wish to call it, or whatever form of tyranny you wish to call it. But what we have right now is 5 or 6 huge splinter groups, each one by themselves, maybe to affect small portions of the overall picture of tyranny. What we need is a hub to that wheel. What we need is a hub that all of those folks can attach to, because if I had that 10 million, that 10 million, that 5 million, that 10 million, that 5 million, and that 10 million, let's do the math. Now I've got 75 million people. And
Hmm.
what are my chances of affecting real change now? This is the way we need to look at it. Our goals are all the same, regardless of the tyranny you push back against. So let's unite under one front and fight all of these battles simultaneously, but do it with a much louder voice, like I have.
And that is exactly the point. And of course, what is it that we are confronted with as a whole, if we can actually, sort of cooperate in this great hub, which the Liberty Beacon is doing? Okay, it is creating that hub. It is allowing information to be streamlined so that basically the overall tyranny is being pushed back against, as you like to say. And that is what we're doing. But what is one of the great obstacles to that? Well, it is the cognitively disconnected individuals that still seem to
Sheeple!
occupy the majority of the population. More commonly than not, we refer to them as sheeple. I sometimes call them sleepwalkers. Others have called them the walking dead, even. But we digress. Sheeple is definitely a term that people are familiar with and has been around for quite a while. And this is what we're going to discuss tonight. So I'm going to drop that article into the chat room. All right. And if things cooperate, as usual,
Well, this
there we
is
go.
one of the shortest articles I've ever written because it's not a tough article to write. And the question that I've been asked so many times is why is there so many sheeple? Why are there so many sheeple in America? And I would extend that question out to so many sheeple actually on the planet. And the answers are very, very simple. So I sat down a while back and I wrote down why we have so many sheeple on this planet. Would you like me to kick this off?
Well, sure. I just want to read the name of the article, which is also rather concise and pithy, if you will. Sheeple 101. Okay, so we all understand what sheeple are already, and we do understand what a 101 would be. It would be the most basic understanding of said body of knowledge. So, Sheeple 101 by Roger Landry, okay, which was published on the 17th of May this year. All right. This article begins also with an interesting little picture. I like it. You have your sheep herding dog. You have a big group, a big, geez, what do they call those again?
A
When they're
flock of sheep?
a flock of sheep. Very good. I always forget, because different things are described with different terms. For instance, a grouping
Well, you
of,
could call it a herd because they're called sheep herders as well. But herd
right.
usually goes to cattle.
Well, this is true, but I mean, everything has a specific. I mean, some
Right.
things travel in murders. Something, believe it or not, there is a grouping called a murder. I think crows travel in murders. But
Yes.
a group of a sheep would be a flock. So there you go. And this is the article Sheeple 101. So anytime, sir.
All right. Why are there so many mindless sheeple in America today? To this question, I have a very clear and defined answer. What results do you expect when you start them out in life by injecting their teeny bodies with multiple vaccines containing neurotoxic heavy metals at levels known to be extremely harmful, if not deadly, and a known side effect of brain damage? Feed them processed foods containing neurotoxic, excitotoxic, and carcinogenic substances such as MSG, high fructose corn syrup, preservatives, coloring, and flavoring such as aspartame. Raise them on genetically engineered or genetically modified food linked to cancer, sterility, kidney disease, and a myriad of other maladies. Spray their food with known carcinogenic and neurotoxic chemicals whose origins were deadly nerve gases such as glyphosate and Agent Orange. Teach them through their most formative years in pathetic Common Core laden institutions designed to fail from the start by their bloated bureaucratic top down mentality. force them to bathe, cook, and consume water purposefully contaminated with neurotoxic fluoride or rat poison. Force them to spend a lifetime breathing air saturated with toxic metals as a result of atmospheric spraying chemtrails that our own government won't even admit is taking place. Put them on psychotropic or psychiatric mind-altering drugs at the drop of a hat, including millions of children, that facilitate thoughts of aggression and suicide. And what do all of these have in common? Our government and health agencies, EPA, FDA, CDC, USDA, mandated with the health and well-being of Americans, all Americans, supporting and in some cases mandating the above. Now I inserted a meme here, and memes are the pictures I make up with phrases on them, and I've made up several hundred of them, and you can find those on the Liberty Beacon in Reality Bites, a page called Reality Bites. This one states, we are sponsors of our own demise. Poisonous fluoride, poisonous GMOs, poisonous vaccines, poisonous chemtrails, poisonous chemotherapy, etc. All approved by, promoted by, and sponsored by our tax dollars and our government. So in essence, we the people are providing the money for the research and the regulation of our own extinction. Please tell me again why I should pay my taxes. Wake up and think. It's time to end this evil or die like good little lab rats. And then we continue into the body of the article. Now, to top it all off, we top all of this off by deliberately numbing whatever intellect survives this massive onslaught with a constant bombardment of pathetic dribble called entertainment, provided and programmed by the bought and paid for lamestream media and saturated with the message, relax, stay calm, trust us, don't get upset because everything is as it should be. Then I inserted another meme, and this, of course, is a slightly overweight American laying on the couch with a beer sitting on his stomach and probably a remote control in his hand. And it states, the sad truth is, over the past few generations, a majority of Americans have evolved from the mindset of don't tread on me into a self-subjugating mindset of please don't bother me. If a large enough majority cannot be bothered to hold those who perpetrate tyranny on us accountable, will there still be an America to save? Wake up and think while you are still allowed to do so. And then we finish the article. What you inevitably, with everything stated above, end up with is what you intended to create in the first place. Sick, mindless, apathetic, complacent, dependent sheeple. The following has been a lesson in Sheeple 101. No test will follow. They couldn't pass it anyway.
And isn't that the truth? I mean,
if you stop and think of every direction, and we've discussed this on your show before, Chuck, we're being attacked in so many directions simultaneously. It's the fluoride every day. It's the chemtrails every day. It's the GMOs every day. It's the vaccines constantly throughout our life. It's the drugs being forced on us almost every single day. And it is the mind-bending drivel or the propaganda that's being forced down our throats every single day. This is a continuous bombardment. Never in the history of this planet has humanity been attacked from so many directions and simultaneously. Never. This is the perfect storm of tyranny we live in today. And anybody who can't see that, well, let me tell you a question. This is why I didn't give a test. You can't pass it.
Yeah, that's the reality is that the biological specimen has been so prepared for the additional input that's going to come from all of the media and the garbage which is pushed as a societal norm, that after all, what can you expect? It's really not a big shock that you have so many people that don't have the ability to think on a critical level, that don't have the ability to examine anything for themselves. They simply, appeal to authority regarding any sort of decisions in their life, and that's what they do. Without any regard for, again, independent thought, or even the basic re-examination of certain things from time to time. It's sort of like, once something is accepted, it's accepted in a general sense in the majority of the population, and it continues on. And all that's built from that is, occasionally they switch things around. I mean, I talk about the baby sometimes, and regarding the wisdom that changed over the years regarding what was generally acceptable. I mean, there was a time in which they told you don't let your children sleep on their stomach because they'll be more susceptible to SIDS, to sudden infant death syndrome. Then they said, don't let them sleep on their backs for the same reason. And now you have a mixture of viewpoints just about this very simple topic, this very simple idea, like which is better for you to do regarding the child, right? And meanwhile, nobody's taking a look at all of the wondrous, increases in fluoride, the increases in vaccines, and all this other damage that's being done.
Well, there are direct ties between SIDS and vaccines.
Yeah.
And if I'm the government, I'm going to tell you it's because your child's sleeping on their stomach. If I'm the government, I'm going to tell you it's your child is sleeping on their back. The last thing I'm going to tell you is that we are bought and paid for by Big Pharma, and we have given them total immunity from the beginning of production all the way to the end where a doctor sticks it in your arm. They're all 100% immune from prosecution, and the government has done this. So as the government, I'm not going to admit that I made a mistake because I'm bought and paid for. I'm going to tell you it's because your child's sleeping on their back. I'm going to tell you it's because their child is sleeping on your stomach. I just got a comment today that just heralds right into this topic. And I won't even tell you the article I put out, but one of the comments I got was, this is just a bunch of fear porn. There's a lot more of us than there are of them. Now, in part, I believe that. If we wake up enough people, there's 315 to 320 million Americans, and there's a few thousand people running the show. So there
Mm-hmm.
are a hell of a lot more of us than them. But you know what my comment was on that statement, Chuck? And this might shock you a bit.
Okay.
This is what I told this lady who put that comment on my article. I said, you need to understand how many sheeple you are surrounded by. Not only that, you also need to understand that when the crap hits the fan, a majority of these people will be very quick to point you out when the time comes to keep themselves comfortable. And this is a fact. So do not count on the fact that there are so many more of us than there are of them. Because I can tell you, in a community of maybe 10,000 people, you might have 1,000 people that are awake. But you will have at least 1,000 people who will point you out when the troops come marching in and asking people, see something, say something.
Mm.
In order to keep myself and my family safe and comfortable, I'm going to tell you where the people are with the loud mouth. I'm going to point a finger at them. And if you don't think that can happen in America, you are a fool.
No, absolutely. I mean, but the reason why I pointed to the whole thing with flipping the child over and, to sleep on their back, sleep on their stomach, sleep on their side, they keep changing. It is. To me, it's an allegory for what is happening in society on the
Yes.
whole regarding your health. They'll tell you, well, what it really is this. You're actually not exercising enough, and then you're exercising too much, and then it's really not the relevant thing. It's like it's always the distraction from the real poison that's being continuously injected into your food stream, into your medicine, into your water. Let's not look at that, because that might actually be the building blocks of life and might be responsible for a whole lot of the damage being done to the human being. let's not look at that. Let's just say that it's all your fault because you didn't make sure that the kid sleeps on one particular position. Which, of course, I mean, look, you raised kids. I've raised kids at a couple of different points. Okay, I'm in the midst of raising one now. That type of wisdom keeps changing, right? But notice the damage being done has been increasing only because of the biochemical stuff going on. The other damage being done is from the psychology because they're being programmed at a very early age to accept certain things. I mean, I start looking back at even children's entertainment and I say to myself, dear God, what is it that was being, hoisted upon the population in general, and what is continued, to be hoisted upon them regarding, again, answering to authority blindly, refusing to look out for oneself, being so open to so many different problems. Yeah, they might have taught you about stranger danger, but you know what? They didn't tell you that you need to get to know the government agents that are actually influencing the crap around you, too, because that's a whole other level of stranger danger, baby. You
Oh,
know?
hey, look, let me go into that for a second, all right? Because I wrote another article and I think you might have read it. And basically, I don't remember the exact title. It's We the People Have to Stop Blaming Everyone But Ourselves. And
Mm.
one of the points I bring out that you have just alluded to so well is look, I can remember in 2012 when this project was brand new, and I was actually working another project called We the People Network at the time. But we won't go too far into that. And we all knew and railed in 2011 and 2012, right up to these elections, we railed about the tyranny going on in Congress. How, hey, look, the NDAA got passed again. You know, the Patriot Act got passed again and strengthened. And all of this tyranny is coming down the road. And we had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people across this country on Facebook, on websites, screaming about the tyranny coming out of Congress. We literally screamed about this. We stood up on our soapboxes with our very powerful megaphones and we told everybody in this country that Congress is tyrannical. We need to do something about it. Let me ask anybody out there right now, what do you think the reelection rate was in 2012? These are the congressmen who were already in there prior to 2012 who perpetrated and perpetuated the tyranny all of us screamed about. What do you think the reelection rate was?
At a wild guess without looking at anything, I don't know, 80%?
93%.
Oh, sorry, I underestimated again.
So all of these idiots that we had been screaming about got reelected. 93 out of 100 of them got reelected. Well, there's two results of that action. Okay? The first result is all you've done is embolden these people who have perpetuated this tyranny by sending them back because they realize you're not going to do anything about it. So now they are emboldened to continue to and accelerate their program of tyranny. The second thing is the mindset of the people across this country. And again, this is where the breakdown is the lack of communication, the lack of all of us talking to each other because we believe within our communities we know what is best. The
Mm.
reason these people get reelected, the reason is because on a vast majority, on a huge scale, every single community that reelects a congressman or somebody who works in the House of Representatives, or every single community that reelects a senator, every state, is under the firm belief that it is every other congressman and every other senator that is perpetrating this tyranny. It can't be mine. It can't be. But I'm going to ask you another question, everybody listening. What do you believe is the percentage of people out there who have a freaking clue on how their senators or their congressmen vote on laws or bills that are or resolutions that are passed in Congress? What is the percentage of people you think actually follow these people along to see how they're voting. Chuck, you care to make a guess?
I'll be generous and say 20%.
It's about 12%.
See, I told you I was being generous.
And in some years, it's
Oh,
actually down as low as 8.5%. And it's the people like you and I who do this. Because we're the people, when we talk, we have to be able to back up what we say. Most people out there, and a lot of talk show hosts, and a lot of people who write commentaries on their Facebook page or any social media, I don't care, LinkedIn or whatever out there, they take what they think is a good message and they pass it along, they perpetuate it. Have they done any research to find out what that is based in? Can I prove what I'm saying? Do I actually know how my congressman voted on the NDAA bill? The NDAA rider got passed again, okay? Let me ask you a question. What do you think the re-election rate's going to be in 2016? If you tell me that it's below 80%, I'm going to tell you you're an idiot.
I'll tell you what's even worse, Roger, is when you start to talk to people who actually did support these candidates regardless of the backlash, regardless of the fact that they're, criminally convicted, and in some cases, they're dead and they don't even pay attention. They vote a dead guy in and stuff like that. You talk to some of these people and you hear things like this. Well, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And I always have to present to them, how about you try not picking a devil? How about that? Give us a
Well,
shot at that. And then they say, well, another thing about, they chose one of the two-party, candidates, one of the main, red or blue candidates. Well, you know what it is. I had to pick the lesser of two evils. I always have to, be the pain in the butt and say, well, how about we select something that isn't evil? How about, you take a look at somebody who isn't evil, maybe get behind them and see and it's just, in one ear, out the other. It's a lost cause,
okay.
you know.
I not only believe what you say, but I need to tell you exactly why. And you had to have known this was going to come out of me.
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to give you a prediction. And it might not be correct, but right about now, it's looking like the Republican candidate could be Jeb Bush, and the Democratic candidate could be Clinton.
Mhm.
Okay, Hillary Clinton.
I'm with you so
Now,
far.
if anybody out there thinks there aren't two bigger evils on this planet, so now I must decide between the lesser of two total evils. All right? This is the paradigm that has been stuffed down our throat. The lesser of two evils, the right or the left, the Republican or the Democrat, because what they have done is they have built a system that will not tolerate an independent candidate, will not tolerate a libertarian candidate, will not tolerate anything outside of the left or the right, the Republican or the Democrat. So you're going to be forced with, and look what happened to Ron Paul. They absolutely raped this guy. They cheated right out in the open.
Mhm.
This guy could very easily have won the Republican nomination had everything not been done that was done to force him in a position where he couldn't get it. So here we go. Now we're in a paradigm where we either have to pick Jeb Bush or we have to pick Hillary Clinton, both who are dead set on continuing us straight down the path we're already on. And that's if the paradigm doesn't collapse prior to 2016, which there are a lot of people who believe that we are going to see a total economic collapse late this summer or early fall.
Mhm.
So let's say we do get to the elections. Now I have to vote. I have no choice because the only two viable candidates now are evil, are super evil, or maximum super evil. Okay? Now, I'm not going to vote for either one of them. And I strongly encourage as many people as possible to stay away from the polls. If you end up with a couple 100,000 people in a country where over 150 million people are of voting age, if you end up with a couple 100,000 people electing a candidate, do you think that will send a message? I've got to tell you something. I would rather vote for nobody out of protest than to say to anybody, I had to vote for the lesser of two evils. What
Mm-hmm.
I have shown you right then and there is I am a sheeple, and I couldn't pass that test. Sheeple 101.
Right. Exactly. And this is
Oh,
what
you
it
got me
comes down
ranting,
to.
didn't you?
I
You
sure
did.
did. I sure did, and I didn't even actually mean to that time. I just knew I would
Yeah,
get a
well,
response, but
that's a soft spot with me.
I know it, but I didn't think it would get you there that quick. But you know what? It's deserving of it because, again, if you're going to accept the parameters given to you, then you've already lost. The thing is, they say, well, you got to pick right or left because that's the way it is. I'm sorry, I choose a U-turn or go forward. Which doesn't involve left or right. You know what I'm saying? When they talk about choosing these directions. But the thing is, of course, there are those like me who say that really, the presidential election is really just a big stage show at this point. It's not really who's going to be making the decisions regarding things. And
In
we've all.
1933, okay,
Mm,
Franklin Delano Roosevelt made a comment that has echoed through history and not enough people have repeated. He said, in the clear, amongst a crowd of people, okay, presidents are selected, not elected. He said this in 1933. What the hell makes you think that today is any different? If anything, the paradigm has traveled much further down the road.
mm, that's it. That's all it comes down to, and that's why I say it all the time. That these people are no longer elected; they're selected. And if you just look at the process by which they become the mainstream candidates, if you look at all of what they must do to rise to the level of being the bigger party ticket candidates, I mean, it's just obvious, and I don't know why there are people that still seem to, these sheep that still invest themselves in the idea that there's going to be some sort of change when they bring on a new regime. And yeah, I
Well,
did use the word regime and change in the same sentence, and I don't care because this is not what we have.
that's what it is. You're
Yeah.
right. And if you stop and think about it, there are a lot of people out there today to which I would lend some credibility to what they're saying, that it looks like Hillary Clinton could very well be our next president for two reasons. One, she will be the first female president, and that will get a lot of the female vote behind her.
Mhm.
And two, um, there are just too many people in this country who were not happy with the Bushes. And even though Bush will bring a lot of money into the Republican Party, I I think that it's a very slim chance that he could beat Hillary Clinton. So now what we are more than likely going to end up with, unless we do some serious changes between now and those elections, what we're probably going to end up with is Hillary Clinton running the the country, or actually being the head puppet for those who run the country. Now,
Mm.
this is a woman who has broken so many laws, has not been held accountable for felonies, who has not been held accountable for massive ignoring of government policy. This is a woman who decided, as Secretary of State, to put all of her um, email communications on her own private server. And then when she left the position of Secretary of State, felt it was within her own power and within her realm, within her thought process, to delete them all.
Mm.
Those, every single one of those emails is by law the the domain of we the people. So what she did was commit one of the biggest crimes knowingly, that the government had one, and this should be the biggest freaking blow up by the American people that we've seen in years since 9/11. But
See,
it has been buried. I could go on. Let's talk about Benghazi. Let's talk about Whitewater.
well,
Let's
let's
talk
let's
about.
let's hold on a second, Roger, because I'm gonna disagree with you here.
Oh,
Okay,
go right ahead.
ready for this one? First of all, destruction of the alleged documents that are supposed to have been produced, by the, taxpayers and all of that type of stuff. That is such old news at this point that I am not shocked, repulsed, or even remotely surprised by it. It doesn't bother me in the least bit, first of all. Second of all,
It should
I
it should automatically disqualify her from running for any elected office in the future, and she should be prosecuted for it.
but
Well,
but
I
but
brought
see, but
that up
there's too
simply to
many of them.
say, okay,
There's too
but
many of
but
them that
that's
have
the most
already.
recent, Chuck.
Oh, I
That's the one that should keep her from ever running for public office in this country again.
see, but
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 it
the thing
isn't going to.
but the thing is, but let's put it in perspective. Is it really
I
that big?
hate perspective.
I know, doesn't it suck? Listen, in
Yes.
an ideal world, you're right. However, in the world we live in, to me, that's not even a big deal anymore. The destruction of evidence, the destruction of documentation, it's almost what I expect from my selected
Within the
officials.
public domain.
Yeah, it's what I expect from my selected officials. I'm sorry. That's really just, sort of like I expect them to have their hair done too. It's just the way it is. Okay. The other thing is this. I also disagree with you that Hillary is the chosen candidate this time. I don't think
I
so.
I didn't say I thought so. I said there are a lot of people out there who are stating she is.
Okay.
You never heard me say I thought she
All right. Well,
is.
I disagree.
Because I don't think she is.
I disagree with that premise. I think we're looking at President Jeb.
Oh God. All right, give me a
So,
sharp razor blade right now because I don't want to feel the pain.
well, look. My point is, I know really seriously because look, you've always got to flip to the other side. You've got to flip to the opposition in one way or another every so often in the modern form of this alleged political paradigm, right? We had to transform from the Reagan Bush dynasty onto the Clinton, which was supposed to be a big change, which wasn't a change, and then you had to transition into the W era, which was supposed to be a new change because things had become too lax, too liberal, allegedly, according to the to the controlled left-right paradigm. So you had to go to the W area.
Yeah,
And then,
government had gotten too powerful. Imagine that.
yeah, well, imagine that. And then, of course, what happens is the continuation of the evolution of government power, et cetera,
At
et
an
cetera.
accelerated rate.
An accelerated rate under W, which it wasn't supposed to be. And then, of course, hope and change was supposed to come through Barack Obama. So, just looking back at history, he continued on with all of the policies and really was, is just about to finish Bush's fourth term, or
Yes.
eighth or ninth term, depending on how you want to look at it. Possibly 12th,
Since Papa Bush.
if you imagine that he controlled the Reagan presidency, like I do believe he did. Guess what? I think we're looking at the continuation of the Bush dynasty, and you don't even need to plug Hillary in there in order to continue it on. You just put Jebby in there.
Well, I wasn't trying to discuss who I felt was going to, because personally, I don't give a damn whether it's Bush or Clinton, because I know they're both marching to the exact same beat of the exact same drum. The only difference is going to be is to get us so divided and to get us so distracted that they can accelerate the tyranny in the background while we're also concentrated on the elections and tearing down. And what we're going to be presented with is a phenomenal amount of entertainment in the Bush Clinton run for presidency, because we know there are so many skeletons in the Bush closet and they're all going to be brought out. We know there are so many skeletons in the Clinton closet and they're all going to be brought out. And it is going to supply some of the most engrossing and the most it's going to keep people glued to the MSM night after night as one saga after another one plays out about the skeletons in these closets. And while that is happening, from the end of 2015 until the elections in 2016, you will see the advancement of tyranny in this country accelerated beyond anything it ever has, because we're all going to be too busy fighting each other over why we should elect Hillary or why we should elect Jeb. And I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you right now, You need to look behind the veil because you're going to see more tyranny being perpetrated against the American people during that election process than in the history of this country.
Absolutely, and no matter which stocking horse they choose to lose, okay, at this point, and no matter which, allegedly elected official they select,
I
the
think they
bottom
already
line.
know that.
Oh, of course they do. They've already got the plan in hand. I'm just saying I'm not in on the planning sessions, okay? The thing is,
If you were, we wouldn't be talking.
no, we wouldn't. I would not have survived this long if I was in on the planning sessions because I would have had to have come out and made it public. But anyway, the thing is,
Well, I would tell you, I would just change one word there. You wouldn't have had to have made it public. You would have had to have made it pubic, because I got to tell you something. All of this comes from the groin area.
oh, absolutely, and agreed again. However, this is the big difference, I think, and this is what we're going to be able to take note of, and you'll know exactly who's been selected right away. When you see what I'm about to say, if this comes about, I'm going to prognosticate here a little bit. If this comes about, then you know we're looking at President Jeb. Okay? Here's the thing. If neither the alleged opposition of Clinton nor anybody else brings out, except those of us, screaming on the tree stumps in the middle of the forest out here in alternative media, if no one in the mainstream ever brings up the following three subjects, then you know that Jeb has been selected. First of all, his grandfather, the evolution of that man's career and what type of family we're looking at. Okay, if
You mean
that
the
never
family that supported Nazi Germany? Come on. No.
probably bankrolled, yeah, right, those
Yeah,
people
okay. But anyway, go ahead.
trading with the Enemies Act, yeah, the whole bit. Okay, so if we go back to that, if that's not even touched upon by even their alleged political adversaries, if the failures, and I always have to chuckle when I say this, the failures of 9/11 and the entire policy of preemptive warfare, torture, etc., all of the things that germinated from 9/11 are not brought up, okay? And finally, the existing culture, the national security state being in the posture that it's in, and that being a trigger point issue with most of America when they actually realize exactly how invasive the national security state has become. Okay, if none of those things are brought up by either A, Jeb's political adversaries, and B, the alleged mainstream alleged pundits that will be involved in commenting on the campaign, then it is a fait accompli. There is
Oh,
no
oh,
way.
I'm not only going to agree with you, but I'm going to show you a historical precedent that proves that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say we were sitting back in 2007 and you and I were having the same conversation, and you said to me, I believe we'll know who's going to win if nobody brings up the fact that Barack Obama was raised, mentored, tutored, and educated by communists. If nobody brings up that Barack Obama cannot prove citizenship in the United States, if nobody brings up that all of his records are sealed for his entrance in any college or for a social security card in the United States and is unavailable to the American people, so we can never vet him as president. He's never been vetted. Never been vetted for the White House. So since none of these things, and they were all known, and I can prove to you these things were known in 2006, 2007, and 2008. They were known and being discussed by those who were supposedly running against him. But it was never brought up, and that drum was never beat hard by anybody. So I would agree with you. But then let's turn that around and let's say I can tell you who the next president's going to be if none of Hillary's people running in the Democratic Party against Hillary bring up Benghazi, bring up the fact that she destroyed all of her public communications while she was the Attorney General. Bring up, and I could give a bunch more. I would tell you that we can use that same paradigm on either one of them. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to hear very little about what you and I just talked about either one of them.
Oh yeah, and of course we never got to hear about the real pedigree behind a guy like Rahm Emanuel. Okay, stuff like that. All of that stuff was
You did say
relegated.
pedigree, right?
Oh,
Because
I
he's a
did.
dog.
Oh,
He is a dog. So,
oh,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
That
No, I chose
fits.
my word carefully. Yes, I did, sir. Pedigree was the word I chose, and for a reason.
Yes.
And the reality is that none of that stuff was going to come out anywhere as far as the mainstream was concerned. It was relegated to the alternative and marginalized as nothing more than paranoid conspiracy theory, racism, and and alleged just sort of the unhinged thinking of the far right or the far left, depending on which story we're talking about here. The thing is, all of that stuff was absolutely marginalized and on purpose.
If you
That's the way
consider,
it's done. So when if the Bush running team is not being attacked by his alleged political adversaries or the mainstream by it, and there are people like you and me talking about how the entire lineage behind the Bushes and where they came from and exactly what the deal is and the damage that they've done to this country and so on and so forth, and the fact that they've been involved in the great corporatist tyranny which has been pervasive in this country for more than 75 years at my count. Well, here's the thing. We will be the marginalized conspiracy theorists who are screaming out because something or other. There'll be a justification for it. Okay.
well, what we need to do to put all of this into perspective and to show everybody just how effective this this program of divisiveness, this program of division, and this program of entertaining us actually works. I want anybody to send Chuck an answer to this question. Show us one, just one, okay, real, vital piece of information that can be used to vet Barack Obama as an individual who is entitled to sit in the White House. Show us one that can be used to vet this individual. There is nothing that the American people that is made available to the American people. We have had a president for the last 6.8 years who cannot prove that he can be vetted, which they are all supposed to be, to fill that position. So how effective is the program? I would say what we've just shown everybody listening to this show is the power and strength of the mainstream media, who is wholly owned and wholly run by the oligarchs, which Princeton, via their own study, has stated now rule, not govern, rule America. And when Princeton tells you the United States is no longer run by a democratic process, it is now ruled by an oligarchy. When Princeton says this, Google it. You can't get more real than that. And what Chuck and I have just told you ought to show you that the paradigm set up by the mainstream media is almost infallible.
That's the bottom line, right? I mean, there's just nowhere else to go. This is why it's so important to talk about this stuff. I mean, people
Don't
say
vote.
just ignore the mainstream. Well, you know what? You can do that all day long. You want to ignore them, but I would rather know what the preview is for the great game plan that is being conducted against me by the enemy.
Your
And
son's trying to be a part of the show.
oh, you heard him. Okay.
Oh, I love it. I love babies. I've got grandchildren. I wish I could just be around them all day, every day.
I hear you. He was almost my co-host again today, but he's kind of moody today.
Yeah, 'cause he's got lungs,
Yeah,
just like his daddy.
he's definitely got lungs, and I mean he's going through a couple of rooms and some serious solid wood right now getting to the microphone. So pretty funny. But yeah, that's Frankie making some noise, and yeah, no, I love him, and you know what? If you put up with that, I'm so sorry to the listener, but
Now you got
it
to
is
boot me
what it
off.
is.
And now you got to boot me off.
Yes, I do, and I got to bring on Greg Ford, and we're gonna. I don't know where this conversation is gonna go, but Roger, I want to thank you. As per usual, you know, we have definitely struck upon some great points, and I actually listen back to. Occasionally, I don't listen to too many of my own shows, but sometimes I listen back to the conversations you and I have because they're very good to reground me in some of those ideas after my brain gets kind of scrambled by looking and sifting and searching through a lot of very interesting minutia. This is one of those ways to bring me right back down to
Minutia.
earth, you know, uh, and remind me what is really important here is the larger portrait, the larger landscape that is being painted, and I refuse to let it paint myself into a corner. And of course, Roger Landry is the founder and the guy that I want you to check out at the Liberty Beacon. That's all one word, the Liberty Beacon. Com. And you know what? There are many other websites also partnered with the Liberty Beacon, or offshoots of the Liberty Beacon. And who knows, in the next couple of weeks, we might have an interesting announcement about another one. So, Roger, I thank you, sir, and I do appreciate you coming on and spending this time with us to give us yet another 101 on what is necessary, the need to know information out there, sir. Thank you.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have a discussion with you, and I really wish I could listen to the second hour because your oncoming guest is a phenomenal individual, and I like listening to him. But unfortunately, I have work to do, and I'm 1 minute into his time, so I want to apologize up front, and I will take my leave until next week.
Right. Thank you so much. Roger Landry once again. And of course, like I said, find him at the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. Of course, Roger is also out there on Facebook and putting out those memes and good information there as well. And it's always a pleasure to have him here on my show. So, of course, now we're going to transition into the discussion with Frank Gregory Ford, which my listeners would know, my regular listeners at any rate would know. He is a remarkable individual himself. He is a guy who has actually been a whistleblower regarding, the reality behind the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, despite the fact that we were quite lied to about them. He's also come on here and discussed with you the reality and the fact that he was a whistleblower regarding the torture program in Iraq, the Abu Ghraibs. That was actually his command that was over there. Of course, Greg was not one of the great torturers. He was actually a medical person who was there patching up individuals who had been abused by various individuals who were under orders in that prison and others over there in Iraq. And well, also he has a lot of other interesting viewpoints on many subjects, and based on his background in military intelligence and with the military in general. It is always a pleasure to hear from him and to break down various things with him. Good evening. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm great, Chuck. Yeah, hey, glad to be on your show as always. So, by the way, I'm getting a lot of interesting things coming out of Washington in the last 24 hours. I assume your listeners want to know. The first thing is that that there's a rumor going around that Hillary Clinton has hired Monica Lewinsky as a campaign advisor.
Are you serious?
Well, that's what's coming out of Washington, right? And the first advice that Monica Lewinsky gave to Hillary Clinton was, "Don't blow it."
Nice, nice.
Well, but if she does, Monica Lewinsky said, "Just tell him you didn't inhale." All right. So
Yeah, did Monica inhale? That's the great question. Of course, the blue dress tells us that she didn't, but let's not get too off into that particular rabbit hole. Wow. What a
Well,
weird statement that was to come out of my mouth altogether.
well,
uh,
well, Hillary Clinton just says that she just wanted to make sure she licks her opponents. So I mean,
well, that was probably the problem, is that she didn't need to lick her opponent. She needed to lick her husband. Okay, so.
well, hey, they're going to have to get back to the grassroots voters, to prevail in this election. So, pardon the pun. I guess there's that don't inhale thing again.
Well, sometimes you have to get down to, you have to get down into the trenches, and
well,
there you go.
Or deep pockets, either one.
Well, I guess you have that opportunity to do so when you're under the desk. So, moving forward.
Well, I guess Monica Lewinsky said that's why she's so glad that Obama is opening up relations with Cuba, as they can get a fresh shipment of Cuban cigars. Okay.
How many Monica jokes do you have tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm just telling you and your listeners what I'm hearing from Washington. All right. So.
And it's, it's a whole lot more sensible than what we usually hear out of those guys. So, why not? Oh my.
So where are we at with your listeners, Chuck?
Well, let's see. Do you want to talk about what's going on regarding your legal representation, or because, of course, you have filed a lawsuit, against the United States government et al., and of course there are some named defendants in that lawsuit as well, which have something to do with the situation regarding you actually being renditioned and all of that, and of course keeping your reports about the torture and other events there in Iraq, from actually making it up through the proper channels and arriving into the hands of the person who was in charge, things like that. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, or do you want to hold off?
Well, I found out I had, in my research, I've had plenty of time to research and follow this thing up. But it turns out now that I created a great big firestorm recently with the courts. Let's face it, the U.S. Attorney's Office is no brain trust, all right? And the U.S. Attorney's Office is responsible for producing the torture memos, all right? And so I looked at it like this. First of all, these folks aren't real bright. And they're used to covering up, the government. The U.S. Attorney's Office exists for one reason, and that's to make sure that the United States government doesn't have to obey any of its own laws, all right? And they do that by keeping everything out of court. Any charges. I mean, it's not like great cases aren't brought against the government. Where they fall short is the U.S. Attorney's Office makes sure that they never see the inside of a courtroom. So, working on that premise, I said, okay, all right. What now? Where would the U.S. Attorney's Office come up with a justification to produce something as hideous as a memo authorizing and justifying torture?
Well, it wasn't simply a memo which authorized and justified torture, but it was actually written in the form of a legal justification, like, in other words, to completely circumvent the international laws. Here's our justification for doing so, based on XYZ. And of course, if you don't believe that, take a look at it. I mean, the Department of Justice was literally involved in creating the papers that basically just make up a justification for the use of these methods, which first of all, let me say, are not productive. Regardless of what we think, because people get this idea watching, 24 and things like that, hey, if you torture a guy enough, he'll give you the right answer, or even if you're watching some of the crime dramas, every once in a while, a cop that decides to beat on somebody or step on their bullet wounds or whatever else, this will get the answer out of a really bad guy. But the truth is, if you torture somebody enough, I mean, they'll confess to and give you information about anything and everything, which may not even be of value. So first of all, from a strategic standpoint, torture is not the preferred method for gathering intelligence. Secondly, it's simply barbaric and against international laws. I mean, is there anything that I just said there that makes no sense to you, Greg?
Well, first of all, my undergraduate before I went to med school was archaeology, and so I'm used to digging into historical archives. And when I started hearing all this absolute nonsense about this ticking time bomb, okay, first of all, where in intelligence history has anybody ever had access to somebody, a live person who had set off a bomb, okay, or had set a bomb to ticking, all right, to be detonated, okay? Nowhere in intelligence annals has that ever happened. And so I thought, well, where did that come from? This 24 nonsense with Kiefer Sutherland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? I'm going to shoot you in the kneecaps. Where's the bomb? Okay, I did some checking. It turns out that never did exist. A ticking time bomb has never existed in terms of intelligence rushing to stop a bomb from going off. All right,
Right.
That came from a actual case history of torture in Algeria by the French legionnaires. The French legionnaires were torturing Algerians, and they put it in their reports saying that there could be a ticking time bomb somewhere. That's why they were justifying their torture of these Algerians. Okay, and which there never was a ticking time bomb. That's the justification that they used. And that is exactly the same justification that the U.S. Attorney's Office said, oh, we've got to find the ticking time bomb. Mm-hmm. Hey, afraid not, folks. Afraid not, U.S. Attorney's Office. Didn't happen then. Yes, you have actually used a fictional story to create the greatest war crime scandal in U.S. history. And the next two things that come up on my case, Chuck, is this, and it has actually caused the courts, the Ninth Circuit courts, to seal my case. Okay, the first issue is, okay, as I said, hey, the U.S. Attorney's Office is no brain trust. People have this misconception about lawyers. Lawyers like to present themselves as being really intelligent and really smart. Well, first of all, they're not. Okay, they're political animals. And so to figure out their motives, you have to figure out what motivates them politically. And in this case, I said, okay, all right, why would they produce, or where would they produce something to justify the torture memo? Where would they get that wording? Or to put it properly, the theosocratic values, okay, the religious values needed to justify that to a court judicial system. And I did some checking, and lo and behold, I found two sources. One was, of all the diabolical, ridiculous things that they used, was the Inquisition archives. Okay? And if everybody says, oh no, they wouldn't be that stupid to do that, yes, they were. Folks, listeners, they were stupid enough to use the Inquisition, the auto da fe, the auto da fe as convened over by the Grand Inquisitor Torquemada. All right, the Grand Inquisitor Torquemada. All right, that's who was responsible for utilizing three tortures in the Inquisition, by Catholics, the Catholic system. The papal system, for torturing the Hebrews, okay? Backsliding Hebrews. That was the justification for the Inquisition. And in the archives, they used, and you're going to love this, folks, one was the trapage, hanging somebody from their arms, from the ceiling, okay, backwards. The second one was the rack. Does that need any definition or explanation? The third, and you're going to love this because we've all heard this now, waterboarding. All right? Mm-hmm. That's where Dick Cheney got this this quote no-brainer called waterboarding. But the irony is the idiots that came up with this justification for using an interrogation against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and a few other quote detainees was that it was supposed to be non-lethal. The idiots didn't read far enough. The Grand Torquemada actually recused the waterboarding as a torture because it was lethal and had proved to be lethal. All right? They didn't tell anybody. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't tell anybody that, nor did Dick Cheney. All right?
Well, and here's the relative interesting thing about that is that, first of all, you're talking about utilizing, the example of the French colonial strifes that had occurred. And believe me, the French have been involved in plenty of this stuff. There's a good example of failure and of a collapsed policy regarding French colonialism. I mean, they were in Vietnam before we were. They were in Laos. They were in, all over Southeast Asia prior to us. They had actually been the pre-invaders to a bunch of different areas that the U.S. winds up going into later. Now, a fascinating thing about this concept of waterboarding coming from the Inquisition, and of course it having been utilized over the years for different reasons, right? I mean, Jesse Ventura likes to talk about how the SEALs use it as a training method, okay? But here's the thing. It being non-lethal, I don't understand how stupid you have to be to believe that. Because, I mean, look, from a medical sense, let's talk about waterboarding for a second, okay? Because you are a trained physician, okay? So you understand, what are the results of this? What happens to a person who's been waterboarded? I mean, I'm a layman, so I'll look at it this way. I mean, I can imagine that it creates, increased blood pressure. It could actually create heart failure because of the induced stress from the situation, right? You have damage that can occur to the brain because of the loss of oxygen. All of these things could put a person's life in peril. I mean, is there more to it, or am I just, or maybe I'm just way off here? Is this not, real?
Well, you're absolutely right on track, Chuck, because it's real simple. If the Grand Inquisitioner Torquemada found that it was killing people, that's the real test here. That's the acid test. Does it work? Well, if it kills the backslider or if it kills the detainee before you get answers, it's not a good method of interrogation. Do not use it. The Grand Torquemada removed the waterboarding as a method for torture, and by the way, he only allowed torture to be used one time. It wasn't a repetitive thing like we have done in our enhanced interrogation program. He said torture was only to be used as a last resort to find out if theocratic principles had been followed. All right, and that was the only time. Okay, and as a result, if it was proved, hey, that they had been backsliding, and by the way, the Grand Inquisition started in 1492. Okay, 0001 in the morning is when the Grand Inquisition started, 1492, under Queen Isabella. Okay, about 2 hours before, a Hebrew captain by the name of Christoph Colombo, okay, got on a ship and with two other ships sailed to the New World. Okay, it was Queen Isabella who said, "Get on the ship. You don't want to be waterboarded because if you're still here at 0001, the Torquemada will put you in the Inquisition." Okay, so it was Queen Isabella who saved Christopher Columbus and sent him to the New World. But the thing was that was the beginning of the diaspora from Spain of all the Hebrews, okay, that are now in part of what's called the Don May, okay, that's D-O-N and then space M-A-Y, all right. Some of the Hebrews went to Turkey, and some of the Hebrews went to a place called Saudi Arabia. All right, very interesting part of the history as it results to that as it results from that part of the Grand Inquisition. Okay, but needless to say, that panicked the courts. The courts now have sealed my case, about a third of my case, and that is part of the reason why they sealed my case, was that issue of reference and citing directly the U.S. Attorney's Office authorization to use torture, the torture memo, as part of their enhanced program, was the Inquisition. The actual physical interrogation part and the psychological preparation, I thought came from something, a little smarter, a little more intelligent than what they used. Okay, the U.S. Attorney's Office claims to have used the U.S. Army's book, the 32 series book on interrogation, which I have a copy of, by the way, and they claim that was what authorized them to use the interrogation methods on the detainees in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, afraid not, folks. Okay, the truth is even more ghastly than the Inquisition. Okay, that is not where they ascertained what is to be used and how these detainees, these prisoners, were to be softened up. Okay, because in the U.S. Army's book, interrogation handbook, there's no reference to cultural issues and cultural differences. The U.S. Attorney's Office consulted with the CIA, and they consulted with the second in command of the CIA, who was the former president of the Deutsche Bank, Buzz Krongard. You might know him as being the man who made a fortune off of 9/11 by betting short on 9/11 attack the day before. All right. Well, Buzz Krongard referenced the agency and the U.S. Attorney's Office to utilize, and I hope your listeners have turned up their radios because they're going to love this, to utilize Nazi Germany's Luftwaffe handbook on interrogation. That's Nazi Germany's Luftwaffe handbook on interrogation. That's where the interrogation principles came from, not from the U.S. Army. Okay, there was no interrogation procedures in place to handle cross-cultural differences like we saw at Abu Ghraib prison. No, verbatim. When you read the Luftwaffe handbook on interrogation, they include such things as the American public and the listeners have seen now. They include such things as taking the prisoner's clothes off. Okay, did that look familiar? Did anybody notice that none of the prisoners had any clothes on? Okay, where do you think that handful of kids from West Virginia got that idea? Okay, all those bad apples. You think they thought that up on their own? No, they did not. That was from the Nazi Germany's handbook, Luftwaffe handbook on interrogation. All right, and that is the first principle that the Luftwaffe handbook states, is to remove, quote, soften up the prisoners. You've heard that term used with Abu Ghraib, in Abu Ghraib, and I know my commander used it. The 205th Military Intelligence Brigade that I belonged to, headquartered at Abu Ghraib, used that term, soften up the inmates. All right.
And meanwhile, you knew exactly how those kids were instructed because you knew those kids at Abu Ghraib.
You bet I did. I knew every single one that went to prison. As they said, the officers got promoted and the enlisted got prison. Okay, that's how that worked. And you're absolutely right, Chuck. And you know my story. I tried every which way I could to get to the court-martial to provide testimony to defend those kids, to make sure that they did not go to prison. All right, and it was the U.S. Army and the U.S. government that defeated me. Okay, in my efforts to get to the court martial was in North Carolina, all right, and I did my best to get there because I knew those kids, I knew them, and I did not want to see them get prison, especially when it was my group and the agency that was ordering those kids to do exactly what was seen in those photographs.
Well, I was going to say, would you like to explain to the listener why it is you wanted to defend them? Because, I mean, after all, it could be seen by by someone who is unfamiliar with the circumstances. Why was it that you wanted to defend, these kids who had obviously done something wrong? I mean, who had obviously crossed the line, who had done all these terrible things. And believe me, it goes far beyond, simply stripping people naked and putting hoods over their heads. All the things they did were atrocities and are literally, easily described as atrocities. The fact is, why is it that you would seek to defend? I mean, I know the answer, but I wanted you to explain to the listener why it is you would seek to defend these kids. Why is it that you didn't think that, they should just go to jail and that was a just thing?
Well, how many officers went to jail? Okay.
None that I know of.
None. Okay. The general that I work with on this case, General Janice Karpinski, okay, she actually had her star removed very, very shortly. Okay, a very short period of time, and then very quietly it was reinstated. As I said, virtually all the officers involved got promoted. The commanders that strapped me to a stretcher, had me tortured, okay, to find out who I had informed, okay, who I'd contacted, all right, about this issue, okay, had me tortured, all right. Those people, they all got promoted. Gee, isn't that fantastic? That they actually helped promote the program Copper Green, the Copper Green program, which Department of Defense is terrified that the public will know about now, horrified. Just ask Cy Hirsch, the famous journalist, Cy Hirsch, about Copper Green. Well, that's what this program is torture and murder on a global scale. And Abu Ghraib was the initial test bed for Copper Green. So
right.
That's why...
And of course, just to explain it to the listener really quick, in short, Copper Green is effectively the program, and you can correct me where I'm wrong, but Copper Green is the program by which prisoners are being exchanged on an international level. Let's just say that you have a prisoner in country A who is a troublemaker. You pay this conglomeration of individuals to export them to somewhere else, to another black site in another country where they can be tortured, murdered, etc. And also you become part of that program, so you might be one of those black sites as well, so that country B, where your troublemaker has been exported to, in short, could also be importing their troublemakers to you, which absolutely, seals them off from escape and all that other stuff, and also allows them to be disappeared without very much fanfare or notice by the local population. This is a fair estimation of the abduction and torture and thusly murder for hire program that has been put into place, through the military and, of course, business interests, on a global scale. Am I correct?
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
And I don't know if I missed any part of that description, if you think I'm off in any way, shape, or form, but, if you want to just explain that to the listener really quickly, this was the genesis of that program was at Abu Ghraib prison, and through that system, which was being handled by the local commanders, the one up top, Janice Karpinski, was completely out of the loop regarding this stuff, but as you pointed out, was later punished by having her star taken away, and then, of course, it was reinstated rather quietly later. But that about summarizes all that, you think?
Absolutely. That program is still going on. You hear vague reference, right now, which is going to lead into my next subject matter that I'm getting out of Washington today, okay, concerning the Bin Laden issue. But you talk about you hear about these black ops sites. When the public hears about black operation sites, the public, they think, oh, it's something that concerns terrorism that goes on there. Well, yeah, it is a form of capitalist terrorism that is going on in those sites. Morocco Poland, they're about to close down their programs right now because they had no idea that these programs are going to be so ghastly, okay, so grisly. All right, for a fee, you can yes, you can have anybody tortured you want anywhere in the world, okay, for a fee, and you can have them beaten up, put on a rack every day if you want, every other day. All depends on how much you want to pay. Okay, if you want to have them dismembered, okay, on film, okay, that can be arranged also. If you want to have them just renditioned and kept in a box for the rest of their lives and nothing done to them, that can happen. Okay, it can all be done for a fee. Now, the important thing to remember is that this program came about, and it's kind of diabolically brilliant, okay? Obviously, a bunch of lawyers didn't think this one up, okay? This program came about with the idea that, hey, for a fee, all these countries, and it doesn't matter if they're totalitarian dictator regimes, they can have their troublemakers taken care of, disappeared, as they like to say, disappeared, okay? But that also allows our agencies, our intelligence agencies, to torture these people, find out anything they want, or even create a situation, okay, where they can gather intelligence on that country, where the weak points are in that country's political system, exploit those weak points, and then turn right around and also gain access to that country's resources, natural resources or industrial resources, through this program. Okay, it's kind of like how to get smut on a country, real quickly and have them pay for it. That's what it amounts to. So that is the result of Copper Green, and that's where it all started. Was Abu Ghraib prison, okay? Abu Ghraib prison. And the big issue was to find out if American kids, okay, and I call them kids, they were all younger than I was, Americans could be directed and expected to follow the principles of Stanley Milgram, Dr. Milgram, of the early 60s, to follow an absolute authority and go against all the morals and values that we were taught, okay? You don't torture people. Americans aren't raised with the idea of torturing and giving great pain to another individual, okay, as part of a political doctrine. We were not taught that. I wasn't taught that. And that's where I had some real issues, being the medic on site, and I was expected to repair the damage done by these horrific torture interrogations. And people think, oh, it couldn't have been that bad, Doc. Guess again. I had one morning where I had 4 separate detainees have heart attacks from the interrogation. One morning, okay, 4 separate detainees, and not one of these prisoners was older than the age of 15. Okay?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I hope everybody heard that.
Yeah, this isn't old men
older
we're
than the
talking
age of
about.
15.
Yeah, we're talking about teenagers here, not old men. Because that was sort of passed around, is that there had been some heart failure related to the what they were calling enhanced interrogation, and generally speaking, they had passed around the idea that this would be among say older men who had lived under stress their whole lives, been in poor living conditions, etc. But no, these were actually not even men, really, still children, essentially, at the age of 15. I know culturally there's a big difference, and of course a 15-year-old in Iraq is not the same as an American 15-year-old, but then again, from a purely physiological standpoint, the amount of stress which must be applied to a 15-year-old in Iraq is not commensurate with causing a heart attack without extreme measures being applied to them. So this is something that needs to be considered here. We're not talking about breaking someone who is already in a frail state. Not one of them was over the age of 15.
Not one. And the shock, I almost had a heart attack later on that day. After that happened, I went in to one of the interrogators and I said, if he continues, I'm going to report the whole group. Okay, I'm going to bring charges. And of course, that sounds like it. That sounds like should have stopped it. It just encouraged him. Okay, and the ironic thing is that I said, okay, fine, I'll bring charges because my Iraqi assets, had come in and said, look, you people are nuts. You people have lost your minds. You Americans have lost your minds. Do you know where you're at? You're completely surrounded by very angry people that are armed to the teeth that are going to come in and kill you. If you keep doing what you're doing, they're going to come in and kill you. It's just that simple. They know how to do it, and we're not the slightest bit afraid of doing it. All right? We just fought a 10-year war with Iran, and we just lived up for 35 years under one of the greatest dictators of all time, most brutal dictators. Hey, Saddam Hussein, we're not afraid of you people at all. If you keep it up, we're going to come in and we're going to kill you. It's just that simple.
When you say that they were armed to the teeth, can you explain exactly what you mean? Because
the Iraqi people for several years had been armed because they were expecting an invasion from Iran. All right, and so virtually every village that we went through had a huge warehouse full of small arms, medium-sized arms, and heavy arms, okay, full with ammunition, artillery, bombs, mines, you name it. They were, every village was armed to the teeth.
I mean, you're talking everything from like AK-47s to shoulder rockets to, I mean, what are we talking about?
Right, RPGs, you name it, AKMs, anything you can imagine, shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles, they had it. All right, they had it. Okay, and it's not and in fact, to show you just where I was, the police station, we had one small cache we found, and we were able to we found so many AK-47s that we started using them as fence posts. We were driving them into the ground, with a sledgehammer and using them as fence posts, and then wrapping concertina wire around the entire police station. Probably 300 AK-47s that we used it as fence posts. All right, so and people think, oh no, this is all nonsense. Hey, trust me, believe me. It's our job to find these weapons and weapons of mass destruction, and we found more than one could imagine. All right, that was the best armed society I've ever in all my 30 years of intelligence work ever come across was the Iraqi people. And then after I left, you saw, virtually you saw a bunch of kids running around with AK-47s, wearing sandals, almost dismantled the U.S. military. All right, almost dismantled. We came probably within a few weeks of actually being driven completely out of Iraq. All this surge nonsense, that was out of desperation. We were in trouble, and we were in trouble because of what was going on at Abu Ghraib. All right. That put such a fury into the population of Iraq, what happened at Abu Ghraib, that they were going to defeat us and attack us no matter what. And you think I'm wrong? What is happening as of today? Okay, what had happened as of yesterday? ISIS is rampaging, through Iraq, and sure, we might have killed a couple of their oil ministers. Oh yeah, big deal. Okay. But hey, the place is a total loss now. It's incinerated thanks to our behavior at Abu Ghraib. All right? That's it in a nutshell.
No, and that's true. So, I mean, considering what was done there, I mean, you incense the local population. You're already a foreign invader. It almost seems like it was done on purpose to create that situation. I wonder about the wisdom of individuals that thought that this was a good idea.
Well, you're batting 1,000% today, Chuck. I started thinking exactly the same thing. Look, we provoke these people; they are going to attack us. And I started getting this general attitude, especially from the officer corps. you know how the officers are. You know, they order people to go out and fight the battle, but they sit back and then figure out ways to give themselves medals. That's my interpretation of most officers.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You know, we had a president strutting around an aircraft carrier deck, you know, off the coast of San Diego, by the way, and strutting around saying, "You mission accomplished, boy. You know, boy, did we kick some real butt." Oh yeah. Well, if you noticed, you know, a couple years later, he wasn't saying that. And did he have to do any of the fighting? Hell, that draft dodging president that we had, he didn't do any of the fighting. All right. And it was a bunch of kids that got that, you know, like I had to work with, that got sent to prison for doing what they were told. They're the ones who had to fight the Iraq War. So, you know, sorry, my sensibilities on this whole thing, especially with my court case, are really out the window. Now, the big thing I've been asked, and I've been getting just bombarded with requests on this, on what happened recently, within 3 days ago, concerning Bin Laden. Okay, I don't know if your listeners know about this, but the Cy Hirsch article, and on what really happened with the Bin Laden takedown in Pakistan.
Right.
Have your listeners given you any indication of what's going on with that, Chuck?
No, to be honest with you, they haven't. But this is relevant to one of those things that they do talk about from time to time, because there's a lot of people that think, you know, of course it goes all around. You know, that some people think that it absolutely didn't happen, that he was dead years before. You know, I find the entire thing suspect because of what happened to the team of individuals that were involved in it. Also watching how, you know, it was played out in a Hollywood sense afterwards has caused me to be extremely suspicious of it. You know, the whole Bin Laden takedown was also weird to me to begin with, because, you know, it was in 2001 that I was hearing from individuals that I spoke to that Bin Laden was going to wind up in exactly the place that he wound up in many years later. It was kind of funny to me that it was, I mean, almost precisely the same place where they told me the guy was hiding the whole time, you know, when we were being treated to, he's, you know, escaped from Tora Bora and all this other stuff. You know, a very bizarre story, but your take on it would be most interesting. So go right ahead.
Well, okay, yeah, since I'm keeping an eye on the time here, but I assume your listeners want to know this. You know, for years, you know, I've been in the intelligence business, and we had been trying to figure out where Bin Laden was. And then I got the real bright idea. I said, you know, let's ask some people that are on ground, okay, in Afghanistan. You know, I mean, why don't we just ask the locals? You know, Afghanistan has a limited carrying capacity. You know, it's real tough to lose, you know, a 6'4" Arab who's world famous. Everybody's looking for, every single database system is collecting on, and lose him in a limited resource capability country like Afghanistan. And at any given time, Bin Laden had between 400 to 2,000 members of his personal retinue, okay, his personal entourage, traveling with him. It's very tough in a place that is limited in what it can produce and what it can support, like Afghanistan, to hide 2,000 people that are basically foreigners running around. And so what I started interviewing and talking to people that were exploring the country, like gem hunters, okay, that were looking for, you know, certain types of rare exotic gems. Afghanistan is like the capital of the world for exotic gems. And the response I got was pretty amazing, okay. First of all, they looked at me. There's like this one fellow I'm thinking of looked at me, and like I was the stupidest person on earth. He said, virtually everybody in Afghanistan knows where Bin Laden is except the Americans. I said, what do you mean? He said, exactly what I just told your listeners, that, hey, a group of people like that large, simply can't move through a sparsely populated country like Afghanistan. It just doesn't happen. Doesn't matter if it's the size of Texas. It just doesn't happen. So what that amounted to is he said, yes, everybody knows where he is. Here, and I'll tell you where he is. And I sent this into my reports. For years, he was between, there's two towns, Kundun and Hunduz. Okay? Kundun, Kundun, and Hunduz, Hunduz. Okay? He was between those two towns, two small cities. Okay? Moving back and forth. Okay? Yes, he was a moving target, but the thing was, he was there, he was located. Everybody knew he was there. All right? So I'm not surprised that all of a sudden that I'm getting a request. One is from somebody I know very well, okay, who is probably the best investigator on 9/11 alive, Barbara Honegger. And secondly, I was asked a question from Washington about what I thought of Carlotta Gall, okay, the name Carlotta Gall, Gall. Carlotta Gall is probably the finest investigator, international investigator, and she has been investigating the ISI, the internal intelligence service internal of Pakistan, ISI. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, and she had been saying all along that yes, that Bin Laden actually had his own department in ISI of handlers that were taking care of him. Okay.
Right.
And this is all beginning after he left, Afghanistan. He came to Pakistan, Waziristan, and then Pakistan. Okay. Now, the way Obama is speaking now is that yes, indeed, the United States did a dashing, daring raid. They went in and they shot up Bin Laden, killed him, and then flew off, took off out of Pakistan. Okay, with Bin Laden's body, and then that was that. Dashing raid. And I always salute my former associates in the Navy, especially SEAL Team 1. And but the thing is here's what we're getting now. And in the last 36 hours is that, oh no, it didn't happen that way at all. It was ISI who said, okay, yes, for a fee, come in and get this joker. All right? Pay us a big chunk of money, which we're already doing. The U.S. taxpayer and your listeners are paying the ISI, okay, right, a lot of money every year. It's in the billions, by the way. And they said, okay, for a nice little bonus, sure, we'll go ahead and turn him over. Come and get him. So the whole thing was actually planned. All this stuff about tracing DNA and all this other stuff, from Bin Laden, that's all a bunch of horse crap. It really is. It's just so much crap I can't stand it.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something weird about that. And this, this is hard to sort of put into context now. But here's the reality. I was in contact with a lot of Pakistani nationals. Not a lot, per se, but I mean like a handful of individuals who had, come to this country from Pakistan, who were still in touch with people over there, on a constant basis. It was their family. They came here, to earn the dollars and to send them home, okay? That's what they were doing back before 9/11 and, of course, post 9/11, okay? So I knew a lot of these guys, and I would talk to them about this situation because, of course, working in the business we were in, a lot of people had come and made a lot of statements. There was a lot of Muslim paranoia that accompanied the post 9/11 fervor. We know about this. Well, anyway, the thing is that these guys that I knew back, and these were just everyday citizens. I mean, one guy had been a pediatrician over there, another guy had been a chemical engineer, other guys were farmers, etc., etc. They come here and they were working at a gas station or whatever, but that's what they were doing here, okay? These guys were telling me as early as, and this is going to sound wholly unbelievable to the listener, but as early as January or February of 2002, when I think about it very carefully, that this is where Bin Laden would be, was in the Peshawar region of Pakistan. This is where he is. Now, kind of interesting if you take a look at where that is on a map and you take a look at where it is he was reportedly captured. and or killed, whatever you want to say happened or didn't happen or whatever else. Kind of interesting that these guys were telling me this, you know, 10 years before, it happened, right? Um, Interesting to me for sure, because that was where it seemed to be common knowledge among the Pakistani public as to where this guy had gone. It seemed to be common knowledge among Afghanis where this guy had gone. And it was remarkable to me, and I dismissed it at the time, thinking these guys are just telling stories. They're hearing crazy stories from back home and they're relating it to me. But isn't it interesting that this is where this guy is allegedly, taken down finally? And of course, as you stated, the whole thing with the DNA and what proof did we have and all that. And of course, I think you meant to say SEAL Team 6 instead of SEAL Team 1, right?
No,
Regarding
I was with SEAL Team 1.
Oh, you were with
Okay.
SEAL Team 1. SEAL Team
Yes,
6
right.
is the one that was
Right.
involved in the Bin Laden
Right.
raid. Yeah, okay. I
Right.
just wanted to clarify that real quick because I was thinking to myself, because you were sort of saluting the guys in SEAL Team 1, and I was thinking to
Right.
myself, well, they didn't have anything to do with this situation, but you're talking about the guys you used to work with. Okay.
Yeah, actually, the first Navy Corpsman Chief for SEAL Team 6, when it was being formed, I was with SEAL Team 1 in Coronado, and they actually took my boss to form the first medical corpsman section of SEAL Team 6. So I was quite familiar with when SEAL Team 6 was formed. So, yeah, so I was familiar with the process. Now, I think you should mention something about the state of Pakistan. Pakistan, for your listeners, is a police state, okay? Nothing goes on in Pakistan without the authorities knowing about it for several reasons, okay? For the Russian issue, when the Russians were in Afghanistan and all the guerrilla fighters moving back and forth, it behooved the ISI to pay attention to what was going on in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen.
Well,
There's nothing
especially
that happens in.
Sorry, especially post, the time that Musharraf was involved in that successful coup. Then it became even more of a military state, actually. And there was no way that they weren't fully aware, that their intelligence services weren't fully aware, because they were empowered by what was, it presented to the world as a soft military dictatorship, but it was under military dictatorship. Actually, the current state of affairs in Pakistan, I'm not so sure about, but I do recall when Musharraf took it over, you know what I'm talking about there, is that it actually became ramped up even more, didn't it?
Absolutely. Nothing goes on in a well-controlled police state like Pakistan, let alone a world-class troublemaker being sought by the main support mechanism of the Pakistan military, which is the United States. Mm-hmm. All right, $25 billion a year goes a long way to supporting a military, of Pakistan size. All right, and that's exactly what we give them. So there's no way that Bin Laden could have been in Abbottabad. Okay, that's where he was eventually, killed, within sight of the officers' academy, without everybody and their brother knowing exactly who he was and what he was doing in there. All right, forget the DNA, forget all the secrecy. I think everybody's grandmother in Pakistan knew he was there. Okay,
right.
So that makes a whole lot more sense. Is that sure for a fee? And remember, on the morning of 9/11, George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, was having breakfast with Bin Laden's brother. Okay, within 24 hours, the entire Bin Laden family were the only ones allowed to fly out of the United States. Okay, on 9/11. After 9/11, 9/12, it was the Bin Ladens. So tell me that the most sought after man for amazingly almost 8 years of the Bush administration, that he wasn't found, that we didn't know where he was, and then all of a sudden, as soon as the Bush administration is out of office, here we go again. We have Obama take over, and all of a sudden we find this guy. Not only find him, but kill him. Okay, so
Right.
please, Americans aren't that stupid.
Right.
I mean,
Listen, we only have a
neocons
few.
and the U.S. Attorney's Office aside, they're not that stupid.
Right, and we only have a few minutes left. Of course, the whole idea with Shafiq bin Laden meeting with H.W. Bush, under the auspices of the Carlyle Group on the morning of 9/11. This is one of those known quantities that was occurring that day. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence, ladies and gentlemen? Of course, nothing is really a coincidence when you get right down to it. But I do want to, before we wind up signing off, because that's going to happen in a few minutes. The hour goes by really quick when you come on for an hour. I wanted to point everybody to a couple of things. First of all, you can find the information on Frank Gregory Ford's case online if you just search for it. I'm sure he'll give you the case number before we get out of here. But also, if you go on to Facebook and you look, there is a Frank Gregory Ford page, which is his personal page, and then there's another one which is under Gregory Ford, which actually has the link to it, link to his legal defense fund and stuff like that. And that's something that I've never bothered to mention on the show before, so I wanted to point people to that as we move forward, because this is an ongoing case, and of course we've discussed many of the details, and if you don't know them all, then go back in the archives and you can find various other appearances with Frank Gregory Ford where we discuss this in depth as to why that lawsuit is going forward and everything else. I want to thank everybody who decided to tune in to the Ochelli Effect tonight, which is of course based at ucy.tv/TOE. That is the place where you can find this radio show, the archives, the YouTube links, all that kind of good stuff, and take a look back at some of the previous shows with Frank Gregory Ford. Each one has a different interesting set of nuggets of information with them, and of course there is also a donate thing there as well if you want to help to keep me alive as I go forward. Anyway, Dr. Ford, I want to kind of give you the last word tonight, and again, thank everybody who decided to tune in, whether you're catching it further on downstream or you caught it live. I do appreciate every last one of you that listens, interacts, and pays attention to the stuff that we're trying to get out there. So,
Okay.
Go ahead, and last word is yours.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, the case number is, for your listeners, for the Ninth Circuit Court, San Francisco, 14-15050. That's 14-15050 of the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco, home of Dianne Feinstein and the home of my intelligence headquarters on Zoo Road in San Francisco. The last thing I'd like to get past to your listeners is I'm being asked a great big mysterious question. All right, Jean Palfrey, okay, the Washington D.C. madam, was a friend of mine, a very good friend. All right, I'm being asked questions now by various interested parties to find out if Jean Palfrey actually attended a meeting between Jack Abramoff, I'm sure we all remember that name, Jack Abramoff, and Mohammed Atta. All right? Jean Palfrey was terrified for her life. She was frightened. And, of course, she was found suicided. All right? That, from what I understand, that is the last meeting that she attended in Washington was between Abramoff and Mohammed Atta. Okay?
And I'll tell
Mohammed
you what,
Atta was the...
Why don't we
Yes.
get into that on Thursday night? Because, like I said, that bumper is going to kick in, and you're going to be back on Thursday night in the first hour. And if you want to, we can discuss, the D.C. madam in the first hour. Or if you have other things on your agenda, that's fine too. I do appreciate you for coming on, and I thank you again, sir. Always interesting information, and definitely leads us down roads which most other places won't. So, thank you again.
Absolutely.
And that's the way that is.
Well-informed listeners are the best, Chuck, and yours are by far the best. So, okay, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, and again, thanks everybody for listening, and stay tuned to UCY, because I think JJ will be up next with Against the Wall. I think that's what's coming up next, people. So if that is the case, do stay tuned, because I do appreciate JJ and his work. And, of course, like I said, thanks again for tuning in to the Ochelli Effect at ucy.tv/TOE. And we will be back on Thursday.